Welcome to Luxury in Moderation, where we appreciate the finer things in life without going overboard. If you're new here, my name's Joanne, and every week I talk about luxury handbags and other luxury lifestyle products to hopefully give you some really good tips if you're just curious about these products. So if you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and ringing that bell and joining me on this luxury journey. So today's video is going to be the second in my series of the business of luxury. So if you haven't seen my first one where I talk about the hierarchy of luxury, I'll link it above. But in this video, I wanted to talk about the very top tier of luxury, which is true luxury. And I do have my trusty textbook there, which is what we used in my MBA class. So in my first video, I basically said that most of the brands that we talk about and that people say are luxury, such as Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Cartier, are premium luxury and not actually true luxury. So what actually defines a true luxury brand? Well, let me break it down for you. So the very first characteristic of true luxury is that it is product driven rather than symbolism driven. So I could pull a million examples of when I said that the quality of the product is the very first thing that I look for when I look to purchase luxury. And I'm willing to pay more for a good quality product. However, many brands these days have maybe still want to produce good quality pieces, but it's taken a second priority to the stories and the symbolism of the brand itself. When I learned about this concept in class, my teacher played two commercials for us. The first commercial was a Hermes commercial where it started out as just a black screen, but you could hear the sound of metal hitting against each other. And then they pulled to a screen of horses and, their saddles on the horses. And then finally they moved to a screen of, I think, an Hermes bracelet, okay? And then the second commercial was of a Cartier bracelet. And that commercial started out as a Jaguar. And it was the middle of the night in London, and the Jaguar was traveling from London, and then it jumped to Egypt, and then, some other foreign country, and then the last scene was of the Jaguar going back into maybe like the boutique in France or something. Okay, so those were two different ways of communicating a luxury brand story. Now, the reason why I have Hermes displayed here in some of these belts that I have bought my fiance is because that is the one true luxury brand that I know for sure displays all the qualities I'm going to talk about in today's video. So I'm going to do a lot of comparison of other brands to Hermes. So basically what my teacher wanted to show me in those two commercials is that the Hermes commercial was focused on the product more. First, you heard the sound of metal hitting against each other because the sound of a product is also a quality of the product. In fact, true luxury is supposed to invoke all five senses. We obviously can easily touch and feel the quality of the leather that we appreciate. Another sense is smell. There's often a distinctive smell of leather. And then sound. Sound is like when you are running around with a bag on your shoulder and you hear the Chanel chains clank against each other, or for example, a lot of people say the Chanel boy chains are really annoying to them. That could symbolize how the quality of that sound is not a luxurious sound to some people. So Hermes started out that commercial with the sound aspect because it wanted the viewers to experience the sound of Hermes metal. And then, towards the end, you could see that the product that they were actually talking about was a bracelet. Whereas the Cartier commercial, we're going through London and Egypt and all these different places. It wanted to show that Cartier has lived through the ages and it's gathered information and expertise from all these different countries and, finally landed at the boutique to tell you, go shop at Cartier. But it had nothing to do with the product. It did give you a wonderful magical feel of traveling the world and invoking some luxury in that sense because, we think, oh, it's so glamorous to travel to all these places. It's so glamorous that they have lived through all these ages, but it really was not about the product. So that's a long way of saying that the product should be the most important thing to a luxury brand, to a luxury product. And that is where most of the attention and care should be if a brand is going to sell us something that is so expensive. They should want to stand by their product and make sure that their product is almost perfect so that it is worth that luxury label. If you have any questions and if I'm not clear, please let me know in the comments. So the next quality is very simple. True luxury should transcend generations, not just years. Obviously we understand some trends are here and gone in the next year. And then there are some brands who, maybe are popular for a few decades, and that's quite a feat in itself. But to transcend generations, where, for example, my grandmother brought a bag, gave it to my mother, then my mother passed it on to me, that's 3 generations, almost 100 years that, I could still use the bag and possibly even give it to my daughter in the future. So that really would go to show, first of all, the amazing quality, going back to the first point, but also that the brand can continue to evolve and be relevant through all these changes. Fashions change and the brand needs to be able to change with the times while also, of course, keeping their own brand identity. So then that goes into the third category, which is being innovative. So true luxury will invest the research, the time to innovate, come up with new styles that people love, and be original. So true luxury is not imitating other styles. There are so many brands that I don't really respect because they just imitate and they don't come out with their own styles. So going back to Hermes has a ton of iconic bags. There are a lot of styles that are very unique that I don't love. Like, for example, the picotin. That's not really my style, but it is unique. And I don't know if any other bucket bag can say they're more similar to that. So for example, I know Chanel has a bucket bag, Louis Vuitton has a bucket bag. The Louis Vuitton bucket bag is also very iconic. And I think that many of the other brands' bucket bags, such as I think Prada has one, look more similar to the LV bucket bag than the picotin. And that's where Hermes can claim that uniqueness. And they have a ton of other styles, which again, aren't really styles that I love or think are pretty or that I would want to own, but they're very, very unique. And it's their own innovation in, first of all, coming up with that style and then being able to sew the leather in that way and sew the straps and attach the straps in that way. It's a technical piece of innovation where, for example, leather work is very different now than a century ago. There are new materials to work with. How can the brand incorporate these new materials that may seem fashionable, but also then transcend generations and be a style that people can appreciate for years and years? Like, they always have to think about those kinds of technical pieces if they are, again, going back to that first quality of being product first, and a second quality of transcending generations. So moving on, the innovation point leads me to a tangential idea of actually being rare. So I mentioned the word unique, and we often think of limited editions, one of a kind when we think of luxury. In this characteristic, when I think of true luxury, I definitely think of Hermes because, as they say, one bag is made by one artisan, and that artisan made that one bag in this one time. Each stitch that that person made is unique. You know, that person cannot replicate that stitch on another bag the next day. It's just, you know, as humans, it's impossible. You know, we're not machines. Whereas there are many, many brands who get the help of machine-made stuff. Maybe bags are only partly machine-made and then partly human-made. But what about the other pieces like shoes or bracelets? Any kind of costume jewelry can easily be made by machines, and they are just not unique. When I think of limited editions, I think it's very, very hard to get right, and I could do a whole nother video on it. I think I probably am going to, but that's one way for the brand to try to get that rarity feeling from its customers. You know, they're like, oh, this piece and this collection is only going to be available this season, and therefore if you get it, you're going to be one of the only ones. You're going to feel even more special. Not only is it a Louis Vuitton brand, but it's a limited edition Louis Vuitton bag. But when they start to do that every single season, I don't know if it makes me feel that special. And when you see that those limited edition prices are so discounted on the secondhand market, that doesn't make me feel special either. One of the characteristics of true luxury companies is that they like to be vertically integrated, which means that they like to own the process from raw material to final product into the customer's hands. For example, let's talk about Hermes again. I believe that they own leather factories. They like to see how that leather is treated. They have a lot of different leathers with a lot of different characteristics, and it is colored. So Hermes is known for its vibrant dyes, and they like to own the process of that to make sure that dye does not, you know, leak or fade or, you know, do some awful quality thing that they're not going to be able to stand behind. So they need to know what happens in that leather factory. And then they bring that leather, they cut it, they have their craftsmen work it into whether it's a bag, a belt, a shoe. They own those people. They don't outsource it to, you know, third world countries or anywhere else in the world. They make sure that their artisans are trained in the right way for their way to sew things, their way to work with their leather. And then once that product is made, they sell it in their own boutiques with their trained sales associates. So the important piece of that is also having the control of making sure everything is done right. Because again, always going back to that first characteristic of having good product quality, they need to make sure it's done right. And the only way to have that kind of oversight is to own every part of the process. Most importantly, I think, is this characteristic, which is being privately owned. So that means that all the brands under LVMH is not considered true luxury. They are considered premium luxury because LVMH as a company can be, you know, traded on the stock market. You know, they have shareholders who want to see returns every quarter. And then you have Richemont, and I think Richemont owns Cartier, right? And then you have the company that owns Gucci. But anyways, my point is all of those companies have shareholders who want to see returns, and it's about the money to them. It's not about the product. And when you are a public company, you cannot focus on your product as the number one priority, because your number one priority is giving the shareholders returns and making money for the company. So let's go back to our true luxury example, Hermes. It was started by Thierry Hermes, and I'm not French, I so apologize if I'm butchering these names, in Paris in 1837. He made leather for royal families. Then he passed it on to his son, Emile Charles Hermes, who passed it on to his son, Adolphe and Emile Maurice Hermes, who then passed it on to their grandson, so they skipped a generation there, and passed it on to Robert Dumas. Then Robert Dumas passed it on to his son, Jean-Louis Dumas, who actually technically did bring the company public, but I'll explain that in a second. So after that, Jean-Louis Dumas passed it on to his son, Pierre-Alexis Dumas, and also his nephew, Axel Dumas, who are currently the owners of the Hermes brand. Now, the public part that I just mentioned, Jean-Louis Dumas, so he did make a change in the corporate structure of the company, and basically 25% of the Hermes company is public, which means that other people can buy shares, or, you know, not just like regular people, I don't think, like people who are able to access that market. Which means that 75% of the company is still privately owned and family owned. And in the article that I read, where I got all this information, and I'll link that down below, it says that 12 members from the Hermes family do own the controlling stake in Hermes, which means that 75% that's still private or family owned is split between 12 heirs of the original Thierry Hermes. So basically, having that 75% allows the company to make those big long-term decisions that will keep the brand a true luxury brand and not just try to make money for greedy reasons, okay? Because the family ownership, you know, they feel that responsibility of keeping their great grandfather's legacy alive. So therefore, you know, it's great that they're earning money, but having that legacy to uphold is probably more of a beacon to them than making money for their shareholders every quarter, that they could be swayed to do this or that decision. So hopefully that makes sense. That privately owned quality is definitely the one characteristic that I always keep in mind when I think, is this a luxury company or not? I do want to look into the Chanel brand a little bit more. I have a feeling that they are also more privately owned, and yet they act very much like a public company that is money hungry and basically just increasing prices to make more money. That's my personal opinion. And that's why I really respect companies that are still privately owned and not part of a big conglomerate. I know it's very difficult in these days. Business is very different. It's very hard for a small business to continue. But, you know, my own personal experience in working with public companies and private companies, I do personally understand that having that individual vision that you want to share with the world can be more powerful driving force of keeping a brand alive rather than just making money and just making sure your stock price is good. You know, like when you work for a public company, all the leaders talk about, oh, the stock price today, is it up or down? Are our shareholders happy or not? Like that just takes away from the mystique and the glamour of what you want to think of as a luxury brand. You know, that's getting into the ugly underbelly of the accounting. Of course, it is a reality, and of course, Hermes does have to make sure that its business is profitable to continue on to serve generations. But it's all interconnected, as you can see. If your primary concern is about profit, then maybe that does make your product quality a secondary consideration, which is what we're all seeing today, where we definitely hear that Chanel and LV quality has declined. And on that final note, I'm sorry this video is so long, location does matter. And what I mean by that is, you know, nowadays we know that a lot of French brands are now making product outside of France. For example, Chanel Jumbos are made in Italy. The Pochette Métis that I actually just unboxed last week was not made in Europe. It was actually made in the USA, which is the very first bag that I have from LV made in the US. And while that obviously did not stop me from buying the bag, it is good for me to know where my bags come from. And I definitely do believe that products should come from where their brands originate from, because that's what I learned in school. My professor told me that, you know, that particular combination of location, you know, the water in that location, the particular combo of culture, you know, what was going on in politics in France during the time that, you know, Hermes was created. That environment of inspiration was the first store near a meadow with lots of flowers that inspired people. Or, for example, Dolce & Gabbana, they take so much inspiration from Sicily because that's where their origins are from. You know, that location is an identity of the brand. And once you go away from that particular location, some things do change. You know, they say that beers don't taste the same, wine doesn't taste the same, depending on what the water tastes like in that location, which is why champagne is so strict in saying you cannot call this sparkling wine champagne if it does not come from this particular region of France. So just something to keep in mind in the back of your head. That's what I do. When I heard that Chanel Jumbos were made in Italy rather than France, that really made me sad because, you know, I thought that Chanel was up there in that true luxury, but, you know, they've obviously decided that it's a better business decision, which means it's cheaper, to make the leather in Italy rather than France. Now, I'm not knocking Italy at all because I love Italian luxury. I love Bottega Veneta, and Bottega Veneta was created in Italy, and that's, you know, where that cachet comes from. But for a French brand to think that they're the best because they're French and then make Italians do their hard work for them is kind of interesting. Also, French people thinking that they're better than Americans, but then having a US factory for LV, interesting as well. So anyways, I hope you learned a couple things in this video, or at least you thought it was interesting. Let me know your comments below. I would be super interested to hear your thoughts on each of these. If you have different thoughts and feelings, I would also love to know, because I am always open to learning new things, and you know, it's just interesting to think about luxury in this way. And I hope that if you did enjoy this video, that you subscribe if you haven't already. I do have a giveaway planned for when I reach 500 subscribers. So we're almost there. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me, and I will see you in the next